Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Deconverted man is here. Deconverted. Deconverted. Be to ge. Converted to. It's more fun than if you do not do it. Do it. Become deconverted. Deconverted man here. All right. So, found a video by this guy. Oh, yeah, this guy in brown. Looks like a monk, but he's actually a Catholic. I don't know. Whatever. So yeah. Called Breaking in the Habit. And his video is called, Is There Proof That God Exists? Yes. Well, actually, no, there isn't. Because his proof is arguments, which are only proofs within the logical sense, if and only if they were valid and sound, but they're not. In fact, in this case, not only are they not valid, which makes them unsound, and they're also not sound, but also they're not valid. It's great. It's just like it's broken in every way, because he doesn't actually present the actual arguments with syllogisms. Instead, he presents a very, very watered down version of the arguments that we've heard countless times. Yay! That means there's even more fallacies, probably. Oh, good. Huzzah! Hi, Captive Desk, in my chat. Don't forget to leave a comment after this video is not a chat and instead is a video of. That will make sense later. Anyways, so we're going to listen to some of what he says, and then I'm going to explain why he's wrong. Yeah.
Around the world, literally billions of people believe in some form of a god, and all know.
Yeah, that's true. And each version of those gods is very different from each other. But the popularity does not make something true.
Knowing, all-powerful creator of everything in existence, absolutely confounding atheists.
No, we're not confounded. It actually seems like you're confounded because you just said that God is believed by lots of people, which, yes, that's true. But then you said a bunch of stuff about God that isn't actually agreed with many of those people. So I think you're confused. So, yeah.
You believe in something that you can't see, hear, or touch, of which there is no physical evidence of in the entire universe? Yeah, only for Catholics.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you admit it, but why? Why do you believe that? Like, no, really, not the arguments that you're going to give us, because those arguments didn't cause you to believe, I don't think. And if they did, then you didn't know logic, I guess. So, yeah,
This does not mean that God is the result of some wishful thinking or illogical fallacies.
No, but you've got nothing but logical fallacies coming up here, so that's not good. So far, we have not had an argument that I'm aware of that is free of logical fallacies regarding God. And you're not going to give us one today. I just know that. But yes, please continue.
We believe that there is not only evidence for God's existence found in the accounts of sacred scripture, personal prayer, and private revelations.
Okay, so circular, subjective, and feelings, which are also subjective. So circular argumentation followed by two subjective things are not evidence for anything at all, except for how you feel about stuff. But the scripture part, that doesn't matter. You'd have to prove that that's true, which you also haven't done. But if you could do that, then you'd have empirical evidence and or a repeatable test, but you don't. So...
But actual proofs, philosophical arguments that logically point to the existence of a God. What are these proofs, and what does it mean for our faith? This is Catholicism in Focus.
It's so
In the absence of
loud.
verifiable scientific evidence for God, theologians and philosophers have turned to logical arguments to prove God's existence for centuries.
And for centuries, those arguments have been broken as hell. And we've pointed out how broken they are for those same centuries. Yet, for some bizarre reason that I do not comprehend, the theists keep on making them as if they're not broken. Why? If I was to speculate on it, I'd say it's probably because religion is partly tradition based, and at least for Catholics, very much authority based. So it doesn't matter if the argument's broken, it's tradition, and the authority has said it. So you just keep using it, even though it's broken, over and over again, because the authority did it, and also it's tradition to do it. I'm still going to point out the fallacies, though.
Sometimes you don't have to see something to know it exists. While
Yeah, that's fair, true. But it's good if you can see something or at least visualize it in some way, shape, or form. We have plenty of ways to visualize all sorts of phenomenon, microscopes, and telescopes, and heat scopes that show the temperatures of things, thermal imaging. That's what it's called. X-rays and Y-rays, Z-rays. I don't know. We got lots of different ways to see to visualize phenomenon. And for God, of course, you have look at the trees, which doesn't show God really, but at least you're trying to kind of show the phenomenon there. But when we visualize the phenomenon, we're usually doing something in relation directly to that phenomenon, not something that points at or hints at the phenomenon, which is all you have for God. Actually, you have less than that, because all you have is the philosophical arguments, which, unless you had logic, wouldn't matter. So yes, they have to be logically valid and sound in order for them to matter. They're not, so that's the problem.
While the arguments are many and varied, and not all of them are particularly helpful, each of these arguments can be grouped into one of four categories of approaches: cosmological, ontological, moral, and theological.
Or as I like to group them, broken, 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 and stupid. Every now and then I think, maybe I'll do one of those S tier ranks and rank all the arguments, but they'd all land on the bottom because they're all brokenly bad. Maybe I'd put Priest up on the very bottom because I just hate it more. But anyways.
The first type, the cosmological argument, is probably the most famous and the strongest of the arguments.
It's the strongest of the arguments. It's so funny because I heard a different theologian apologist say just a while ago, I don't know how long ago, that the strongest argument was the moral argument. It's almost like whatever argument you like the most is the strongest. But strongest isn't a thing in logic at all. Either you have a valid and sound argument or you don't. There's no strong argument or weak argument. No, there's just a valid and sound argument and a broken ass argument. So you're going to give us a broken ass argument. Here we go. Whee! We can all just repeat it. We already know. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. So the universe began to exist, therefore the cause is God. And my God, my version of God, not anyone else's God, by the way. Just letting you know. Yeah.
Looking into the universe, or cosmos, we notice a relationship between all in the created order. There are...
No, we don't notice all because we haven't seen all. We've only seen what we have seen, which is not all. Stop lying.
are patterns that develop, motion is visible, and contingencies that arise. What this argument proposes is that if there is anything that is now that wasn't before, there must be something that caused it.
And that argument is mostly true for the most part, for most everything. But there might be an exception in quantum physics, and I'm no quantum physicist, so I could be wrong, but there are particles that seem to come into existence just because they do. And they can be observed when certain conditions are made to come into existence. Well, you say, well, those conditions have to be met to make them come into existence. Well, yes, because we're doing it artificially, but we extrapolate that if we can do it artificially, then there might be a way that it's done naturally in the cosmos. We could be wrong about that. But what you're doing is extrapolating from the known to the unknown. And that is not something that you should do. When it comes to the universe, there's a lot of unknowns. And cosmologists who actually study the universe have some different ideas about how it works and why it works or what's going on and when did it start, if in fact there is a when involved. And cyclical universes is possible. And so are many other hypotheses regarding the universe. But what you're leading into is going to be a fallacy very soon, and here's why. This is true of the parts. You are correct in the observation of almost everything, except for maybe that quantum thing, but we're going to ignore that because I could be wrong about that. There's a cause and effect. Okay, that's true of the parts, but not necessarily true of the whole. And that is the fallacy of composition. The compositional fallacy occurs if and when you infer that something's true of the whole because it's true of some parts of the whole. The tires are made of rubber, therefore the vehicle of which is part is also made of rubber. No, the tire's made of rubber. The rubber's on the tire, and the tire's on the car. Now the car must be made of rubber, right? Because that's what the tire was made out of. The tire is round, and therefore the car is round, right? Oh, and cause and effect is a thing, so therefore it must be a thing that the whole universe is. We don't know, though. Might not be at all. Might not work that way. So that's the fallacy of composition. That's all that you're doing. And so don't do that.
For an example, we can look to St. Thomas Aquinas' second proof, referred to.
Yeah, the broken one. Right. I really need to recover those arguments at some point. I think I did cover them once, or part of them. I don't remember. But they need to be recovered, I guess. Recovered? Yes. Recovered and covered again. Yes.
As the proof of first cause or efficient cause. We know that if something, A, exists, it did not create itself, but was created by something else, B. If B doesn't exist, then A cannot.
Why would you do it that way? Why wouldn't you do it like C and then A is before that? It's kind of weird, but whatever.
Not exist either. But this also applies to B, meaning that there must be a cause C for B and a cause D for C, and so on.
Why would you go backwards? Why wouldn't you go forwards? Why didn't you start at D, then C, then B, then A?
To repeat this process infinitely would not make any sense.
Yes. It wouldn't make any sense. So we're just not going to do it because it doesn't make sense. Also known as appeal to personal incredulity. I can't understand it, so it must not be true. But of course, you're going to insert God here. Yeah, of course you are. That's a problem.
For there must be a first cause. And the only way for this to be true is if there's a being that is causality itself.
And that being that is causality itself is caused by what? Oh, nothing. Right. So you've got special pleading required for that being. Why is that being not subject to the same rules that we have for everything else? It just isn't, because that's all. So it's special pleading.
Existing outside of time and space in pure actuality.
In pure actuality? What the hell does it mean to be existing in pure actuality? What is that? Anyways, time to bring up MS Paint. All right, so here we go. All right, here we go. Now, God's up here. He's complaining because people make him not exist, darn it. And that's, So outside space is nowhere. Outside time is no when. See, time moves forward, A, then B, then C, then D. And then space is up, down, left, right, or as I like to think about it, northwest, southwest, also east. If you know, you know. The cosmological argument has a fallacy composition and might not be true anyways due to how the universe came to be. We don't know, can't infer. There you go. So now to this broken argument, and that's it. We've identified like 3 fallacies already. Special pleading required for your God, the fallacy of composition, and you had to appeal to personal incredulity. But I'm willing to negate that one because that was kind of outside of the argument that you were giving. So you have at least 2 fallacies. In fact, we only need one, so we can ignore the one about God. That leaves the fallacy of composition, which you've never fixed and no one ever has. I don't know why, but they just refuse to accept that it's the fallacy of composition. Just flat out. Like, no, it's not. And then that's it. That's the end of it. They never explain why. But yeah, so all you need is one fallacy, and that's it. That's the end of the argument. It's broken. It's not a weak argument or a strong argument. It's just not an argument anymore. But also notice he didn't have any syllogism, so there's nothing to be valid here either. So if it's not valid, it can't hope to be sound. So that's a problem too. But oh well. Back to the video, right? I only prepared that MS Paint thing for one thing though. So I'm not ready for the rest of the video. I'll do fine.
In other words, God. You might think of it in more practical terms. Why do you exist? Well,
biology.
Because your parents made you. Why do they exist? Because their parents made them. And so on and so on.
Yeah, and you go back far enough, and eventually you get to this point where what made things is like the fundamental forces of nature themselves. Like these chemicals came together because they could, and then they bonded with each other because they had the right conditions, and then they bonded with other stuff until eventually it got complicated, and it got complicated to the point where it did something that let it do more than it was doing before. And this emergent property came from it that we would call life. And then everything got way more complicated after that. And so what made that happen wasn't anything other than just that's how things are, as far as I can tell. Now, maybe you want to pretend like God's messing about with those molecules or whatever. And, fair enough, I suppose. If you want to pretend, you can pretend anything. But then God itself still would require an explanation other than just asserting that that's it. That's where it terminates. But if you go with the cause and effect thing, and you say there can't be an infinite, how can God do anything at all What caused God to think? Well, if nothing caused it to think, then how can it think at all? So how can God do anything unless that has an ultimate start of that thing? But then that thing is always there. And how does that work? And why? And you don't have an answer for any of those things. But, whatever.
But when would this stop? Before every being, there is something that caused it to come into being, including the Big Bang itself.
Wrong. There you go. There's the fallacy of composition in action. And we know it's the fallacy of composition because, like I said, the parts that you mentioned, the parts being, in this case, humans and referencing that, do not equate the whole. We do not know what's going on, Big Bang, broadly speaking. We got some ideas, but not all ideas. And so, I'll just prepare a very sophisticated presentation here. All right, there we go. All right, so here's a little thing, and then this is the universe, right? Let's see, universe, right? And like, well, you go backwards, right? And you're like, okay, so this little dot here, and you're saying there's something that made that be. Well, but we don't know that. Maybe that dot always was, or maybe it came from a universe going this way, and that universe, is because of this universe going that way. Or maybe it's way more complicated than anything like that at all. Maybe this is how it is. And I say maybe because, I don't know. What if we imagine that reality is like this dot, but also reality is also like everything around the dot too. But because of the nature of reality, this dot is always going everywhere all the time and moving in every direction that it can move, which is everywhere all at once, all the time. And this stretching of that dot is what makes a universe happen. And so it grows bigger and becomes a square and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But there's never going to be a point where it fills everything up because there's nothing there, because it's infinitely big. There's nothing, you can't stop filling up infinity. However, it also doesn't stop stretching. So we, puny little humans, our little planet is like over here somewhere. It's a tiny little, smidge of dot, in this little, we can't even hardly see it compared to the rest of the cosmos, because it's pretty damn small, right? And we're going to make it bigger just for now. But if everything else is still expanding outward and we're going to get pushed farther and further away, which is what we observe happening, everything is moving away from each other. So we're going this way, whatever direction you want. And meanwhile, everything is still being pulled away from each other, just like it's always been. So for all we know, there's another bang going on right now, or about to, or whatever. And that bang is why things are going even faster than they were before, or maybe they're just going super fast now and that has nothing to do with it. But regardless, this is going to be a whole nother universe. And by the time that it can't ever reach us because we're going to be retreating faster and faster than it ever could reach us, so we'll never see it. But by the time that universe is capable of supporting life, we'll be long extinct. But also those people or creatures or whatever will think, this is really weird. Whoops. How does all this work? And they'll also have the same questions. And meanwhile, everything is still expanding and still expanding. That could be one way. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Neither is this guy. But he wants there to be an answer. And the answer that he wants is God. And not just any God, but his version of God. Because his version of God is really all that matters to him. The other versions of God don't matter. What about a God that's inside space-time? Well, that's not the God that he believes in. So it's a different kind of God. Could be the actual God, but he wouldn't care about it because it's not his God, right? Anyways, I think things are way more complicated than this guy seems to think. And his simplifying and dumbing down of reality is just that. It is dumbing it down. And sadly, his viewers eat it up. Oh, this is great. Nom, 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 nom. Oh, I love it. Yes, God. Amen. Woo! It's not how things work.
Everything in existence may have existed in a super dense mass before exploding into everything that is, but what caused that mass to explode, and how did that matter come to exist in the first place?
We don't know.
Why is there something rather than nothing?
The old question. That's this question. Because nothing is incoherent. That's why. Because if you had nothing, you have no rules and paradox is allowed. And the moment paradox is allowed, then all rules are off. All rules. There are no rules because a rule would be something. So everything can happen all at the same time, and nothing happens, and always things happen paradoxically because paradox is allowed. Then the moment that there is a rule that paradox isn't allowed, well, then you don't have nothing. In fact, the moment that you have anything, you no longer have nothing. And since there isn't a rule that prevents something coming into existence from nothing, because if you have nothing, then you have no rules that say that can't happen, then you don't have nothing. And if you have any rules at all, you don't have nothing. So perhaps nothing is an invention that we humans came up with, a concept that exists in our brains, an object of the mind. It doesn't exist in reality and couldn't exist in reality. Why is there God rather than no God? See, that's the question that you should ask there. But he won't. But really, shouldn't he? If he's going to say, why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there God rather than no God? I don't know. Why is it that God instead of a different God? Why is God this way instead of that way? I don't know. Why am I a human and not a lobster? Well, that's just how it is. But why? I don't know. Where did God come from? Well, nowhere. God's always existed. Why? Because that's how God works. But why does God work that way? Why doesn't it work some other way? Because your Bible says that's how God works. That's why. But you don't want to admit that. There's something because there can't be nothing. And the something that is there is the result of natural phenomenon. And every time humans have thought that it was something magical, mystical, paranormal, supernatural, they have been wrong. So why should we think that they're right this time? We shouldn't. It's some natural phenomenon, and maybe one day we'll figure it out. And when that day comes, the theist will say that God made that possible. Otherwise, they stop being a theist. Theism is a bizarre thing. You have to believe in some sort of God, and if you don't, then you're one of us, one of us, one of us. You're a pesky atheist. You're a non-theist. You're not them now. And maybe nothing else about you will change, except that you don't believe in this thing anymore. But for some people, they can't, or they won't, and who knows why. That's an interesting phenomenon. But rather than using broken-ass arguments to support your belief, why not admit, since there is no empirical evidence and no repeatable test, which you didn't mention, he admits that there's no evidence, but he doesn't talk about there not being any test either. Why not just admit that the arguments are broken and say it's faith? Why not just own up to it and say, yes, it's faith? We don't have proof of God. We have faith in God. Well, but the atheist will say that's silly because faith isn't a good way to get to the truth. Yeah, the atheist will say that, but at least you'll be honest. Oh well, back to broken arguments, I guess.
There must be a first cause, and the only explanation for this would be a being that has always existed and was never caused by anything else.
No. That wouldn't be the only explanation. There'd be an infinite amount of explanations to there having to be a first cause that wouldn't be a being. In fact, a being is extraordinarily complicated. And the only beings that we know about are the sort of beings that we observe. So using your same sort of style of argumentation that's extraordinarily broken, I'll use it for God. We humans evolved over time to the point where we are at now. So God had to evolve over time to the point where it is now. Well, but it didn't do that. It's always just existed in the state that it's in. Not sure how that works. Well, okay, what's God's brain like? Oh, God doesn't have a brain. Oh, it doesn't? Then it can't think. Oh, well, God has a mind, but we've never seen a mind without a brain. So how does that work? How do you have a mind but no brain? How do you exist without space-time? None of it makes any coherent sense. And also, even though that's the case, it could still be true. But you guys, the apologists, never bothered to even try to explain how any of it could work. How does God function? What is it made out of? It's not made out of anything. I've heard theists go, oh, God is not complicated. God is simple. God is made out of God. God's made out of God particles. It's God all the way down. How does that work? There isn't an answer to this because your holy books don't give you that answer. But also, you've never even bothered to try to figure out an answer either. Or if you have, nobody's codified it and tried to explain it that I'm aware of at any rate. Maybe somebody somewhere did, but not this guy. And not now. So no, it's not the only explanation. It's just the explanation that you want. So this is a bald assertion. Another logical fallacy.
We call that being God. St.
No.
Thomas uses this line of thinking
You call that being God.
for three of his other arguments, namely,
And those arguments are also broken and flawed.
for motion, contingency, and gradation, all pointing to the illogical nature of an infinite regress.
And all those things are completely broken. And of course, infinity is a thing, and apologists always play with infinity, because if doesn't God exist for infinity? Or, well, they say, well, God exists for eternity. That's different than infinity. Well, it's actually bigger than infinity, because eternity is infinity going both ways. That is to say, eternity has always been where infinity has a start and no end. Eternity doesn't have a start or an end. Well, wait a minute, but maybe there's something greater than that then. Maybe there's a greater eternity infinity. And there's a thing that explains that. And then there's still a regress there. You don't know. But as far as infinity being incoherent or whatever, that doesn't make it not true. And it doesn't make it false. And infinity certainly is something that you can traverse. Okay, so this is, in fact, we do it all the time. Okay, so we're familiar with numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Well, in between every single number, you have, 0.00 whatever, 1, and 0.0000, 2, etc. All eventually leading up to the next thing, which will be point, 1 less 0, and so on. And that will eventually lead up to a thing that will be not as small, etc. And so, but you can go smaller, and you can keep going smaller and smaller and smaller. So inches can go to an even smaller measurement, and that can go to an even smaller measurement, and so on and so on and so on. So when you take a step, you're actually crossing an infinity already. Every step you take and every breath you make, you're crossing infinity, and I'm watching you doing that somehow. But also you're crossing infinity. So there you go. Yeah. But if your God can be infinite, then so can anything else. If your God's allowed to exist forever, then so can anything else. Or your God requires an additional special pleading. How many special pleadings does God require, anyways? Lots is the answer. An infinite amount, perhaps. Anyways.
To prove that there must be an ultimate mover, cause, necessity, or standard by which everything else exists. But what if we don't want to look to the world? We want to think about God in God's self. For that, we can look to St. Anselm's ontological argument.
The worst argument of all time ever. If I can think about it, it must exist. I think that's this argument. Yes, the giant pizza argument. All right, here we go.
For Anselm, it is a logical fact that if there is a God, he must be greater than anything else that can be conceived.
All right, I'll go with this.
If we could conceive of something greater, then that would be God's, not the first thing.
All right, cool.
Since we're able to state this, we know that God exists, at the very least, in our minds.
I agree.
But if God only exists in our minds, then the idea existing in reality would be greater than our conception of God, but there can be nothing greater than God.
Why is existing in reality greater than existing only in my mind? According to whom, other than the person making the argument? By what standard and what measurement have you decided that it is greater to exist in reality than it is to exist in my mind? What system are you using? See, greater, that's a claim, right? 3 is greater than 1. Well, it's bigger than 1. And so that's what I mean by greater. You draw the little alligator eating the bigger number. That's what I was taught it was, at any rate. So we bring up MS Paint again, because that's what I do. All right, time to draw an alligator. All right, here we go, alligator. There's our alligator. And it wants to eat the 3. It doesn't care about the 1. Because, well, 3 is greater than 1. It's greater. Greater than. That's what that symbol is. It's an alligator. See? Put little teeth on it. Little eyeball on it. It likes eating the biggest thing. It doesn't care about the little things. All right. So so that's what it means to be greater than. So the greatest thing that you can conceive, whatever that is now God. Okay. All right. Cool. I don't know what that is, but okay, sure. It's pretty great. I don't know what it is. Yeah. And he's saying, well, greater than that is actually existing. Why? Why is that greater? Just is. Oh, okay. I mean, that's it. That's it. It's never explained at all. It's just you're just supposed to accept that that's how it is. Okay, but here's the problem. Grant this argument, tentatively speaking. I will grant the entire argument as is. But you don't know what my concept of God is. And that's a problem. Because I think the greatest concept of God is a God that reveals itself to all of humanity in a way that we cannot be mistaken about it at all. And that's the greatest concept of God. But since that concept of God exists in my mind, then it must exist in reality. But it doesn't, because we don't all know what God is in a way that we can all be sure. But I said it was the greatest concept of God. It's certainly greater than a God that remains hidden and obscure and seems to be identical to every other human concept of God that we have available to us. It certainly seems greater than that to me, because it's all subjective, isn't it, Pastor? And that's the problem with this whole greater than thing. But you can't just believe things into existence. I can picture a pizza. It's a really great pizza. But what's even greater than that pizza would be for that pizza to exist here and now in front of me. That would be pretty great. It's not here, though. I can think of a lot of money. And that's a lot. I mean, a lot of money. And it's great. And the greatest concept of money would be for me to have it in reality, but yet I don't have all this bazillions of money in front of me. I can't just want things to exist and then poof, they exist. The greatest concept of society, utopia, right? Perfect realm where everyone gets along and everything is perfect. That must exist in reality, but it doesn't. So perhaps your argument sucks ass. Just saying. Just an idea. Yeah.
Therefore, God must exist in reality. In other
no.
words, the very idea of God necessitates God's existence.
Except it doesn't, because then the idea of everything would necessitate that existence. So I've conceived of a God-eating monster, and it's the greatest God-eating monster that I could conceive of. And so the very fact that I conceive of it means it exists, at least in my mind, right? Well, what's greater than existing in my mind is to exist in reality. And so it must be that the great God-eating monster exists in reality, which means that there is a God-eating monster that now has to eat God. And now God has been eaten by the God-eating monster, who will now sadly starve to death because there are no more gods to eat, unless the Hindus are right. Then it eats a whole bunch of gods, gets really fat, and dies from being too fat, and maybe a few gods survive. But that's okay. I've got more God-eating monsters that I could just bring into existence merely by thinking about them, and then they start to be real, and the rest of the Hindu gods will be eaten until we're left with nothing but the God-eating monsters that will then die of starvation. Very sad state for them, but hey, look, that's what happens. But I am thinking of God again. That's okay. I've got more God-eating monsters. We can keep this up all day long.
For some, this might sound like a mind trick or some wishful thinking. Surely thinking about unicorns doesn't make them exist.
Right.
But that's not what Anselm is getting at. What this argument
But it is.
does is less convert atheists into theists and more ground our understanding of God logically, helping us to understand the nature of God. If God is that than which nothing greater can be thought, then God must be omnipotent, omnipresent, all-loving, and completely sufficient in himself.
Why? Why must God be those things? What makes those things great? Omniscient, omnipotent. Okay, I understand that being pretty darn good. But why loving? Why not hating? Isn't hate powerful? What makes love more powerful? Sufficient? Okay, so God doesn't need anything. So why does it need my worship? Or my belief? Or my agreement to follow it? Or my obeying certain rules? Why does God need creation at all then? So why did God make anything? If it's sufficient, why does God have angels? What's the point of them? Or for the Catholics, also the saints. Why? Can't God do it all itself? Why would God make anything? And why is being sufficient a great thing? Maybe relying on help from others is greater than being sufficient. Who's to say? What are we basing this on? Oh, just whatever. Yeah, okay. All right.
Himself. God is not just some powerful wizard in the sky or some Santa Claus-like figure.
Well, it could be.
For these things have limitations and potentialities. The point he is trying to make is that God is not like other creatures.
Yes, requiring lots and lots of special pleading. No, I got that. I understand that.
Finite, weak, filled with potential. God is by his very nature perfect. And so,
but maybe it's greater to have potential that hasn't been fulfilled than to have all the potential fulfilled. Why do you think it's greater? Perfect. What does that mean? What does it mean to be perfect exactly? Because that's ambiguous. But what would something perfect be? And don't just say God, but explain what perfection is. And if you can't do that, then what use is the label? We know what perfect is in reference to things, like a perfect score. What does that mean? Well, it means it's the best score you can get. It's 100 out of 100. It's a perfect score. Why? I don't know. That's what we decided. Well, isn't 0 a perfect score? No, 0 is a bad score. It's a perfect score of 0, though. Yeah, but that's not what we say. That's not what we mean. It's a perfect dive. It's a 10 out of 10 dive. It was flawless in execution. This video is a perfect example of a bunch of bad arguments lined up and then watered down to the bare basic minimum for the audience to gobble it up. But the video that I'm responding to. This video that I'm doing is the perfect video to show the theist what they're getting wrong when they do these sort of things. Yeah. But what do you mean perfect other than that? Anyways, we're never going to find out.
So rather than prove God outright, this proof helps to guide Christian theology away from illogical conceptions of God.
No, it doesn't. And illogical conceptions of God, I'm sorry, but your conception of God is not logical, even a little. If you've got the triune God, there's no logic there. You've got omnipotent, that's not logical. You need logically potent, that's fine, but omnipotent is a paradox. Can't do it. Omniscient, yeah, okay, fine, but there's a problem with knowing everything, which is you can't know what it is to not know anything. So there's a paradox there. Just a few things. Also, you can't do things that you can't do. Like you can't do sin. Like your God couldn't sin. So it can't do everything. Like I said, it's logically potent, not omnipotent. But oh well, we're going to ignore all those things, because it's convenient. We're just going to pretend that this helps us get away from all those other gods and make it closer to the God that we think exists, because that's what it does, even though it doesn't do that. We're just going to pretend like that's how that works.
To believe in, say, a God that didn't care about the world would be a self-defeating conception of God, and so cannot exist. Of course, there are other logical ways of conceiving of God beyond deduction and abstract concepts. We can also look to human nature and propose what are called moral arguments.
And these arguments are the worst sort of arguments before the worst argument that was. See, if you can conceive of the worst argument, then that must mean that the worstest argument exists not just in your mind, but also in reality. And that's the argument that he's about to do. But also the other arguments sucked as well. So,
When we look to human nature across time and space, there is quite a bit of diversity, yes, but strikingly, there is a lot of similarity as well.
There is? Really? I'm sure you could demonstrably demonstrate that to be the case. I'm sure you have plenty of citations to show throughout history that you have no citations. So what are we basing this on?
In every culture, cold-blooded killing is immoral.
Cold-blooded killing is immoral in every culture. Let's see. Aztecs beheaded people to sacrifice to their god. So that's pretty cold in my view, but not in theirs. So it wasn't cold-blooded killing. Oh, wait. The Jewish people, they had 613 laws that I read online on my channel. And many of them were stoning to death people. Cold-blooded killing. So that seemed moral to them. They were fine with that. It's almost like what you said isn't true. Just looking at two examples. Oh well.
In every people, rape is an abomination.
Really? Tell that to Genghis Khan. He didn't seem to think so. He seemed perfectly fine with it. And, well, look at the Jewish thing again. Oh man, there's commandments that allow you to take the young girls from the city that you captured for yourselves. I'm sure that they were perfectly willing to give themselves to the people that ransacked, destroyed their city, and killed their kids and their husbands. Oh yeah, they were very happy to be taken by the Jews and used by them. So it wasn't rape anymore. that would be silly. Oh, wait, no, it would be rape. Okay. So yeah.
In every society, theft is outlawed.
In every society, theft is outlawed. Every society? Really? Is it though? Because some societies have no concept of ownership, therefore have no concept of theft. So that wouldn't be. It's almost like what you said is wrong.
Is this because everyone's read their Bible and learned these moral truths? Highly unlikely. Given the diversity of time and place, given the fact that some of these cultures existed before the commandments were even written or had no contact with the outside world, the fact that these truths are held universally shows that they were not taught, but rather exist innately in human nature. There's
Are these traits evolved with us through time because they benefited both us as an individual and society in large? Because stealing from somebody else means that I might get stolen from. And I don't want to be stolen from, so I'm not going to steal. Now, stealing might profit me in the short term and might give me an evolutionary benefit, but in the long term, it might not profit me. So, therefore, I might make rules against stealing. Or I might find some clever way to make stealing seem like it's not stealing. Like, I don't know, it's just off the top of my head. Like, if I'm ruling everybody else and I'm in charge, everyone has to give me, like, I don't know, a percentage of what they make, and we're going to enforce that by, like, guards or something, that they'll be kind of threatened to have to give that up to me, and then I'll use it for the good of the kingdom, but also for the good of me. A lot of it will go in my pocket, but some of it will go back to the community at large. And we'll call this thing tax. Yeah, that's what we'll call it. And it won't seem like theft anymore, even though it basically is. Damn. Sucks, doesn't it? Oh well.
There's something within us that just knows these things are wrong.
And yet, you're able to ignore that. So how's that possible? Also, sociopaths. But who cares about that?
No one had to tell us. And if that's the case,
but our parents do tell us what's right and wrong. So that's not true. We also watch people doing things or not doing things. So that's not true either. I just saw this. Let's see. What was the thing? Blah. I just saw a thing lately where it was leading by example, and the dad kept putting his chair under the wife while she was playing with the baby, the toddler, and then the mom went to look for a chair, and this is like over the course of however many days that this was repeated. And the baby brought over its little chair for the mom. And it's like, oh, because it learned from observation what to do. Almost like it needed to be told what to do, at least indirectly. So this is wrong, man. It's like everything he's saying is completely wrong. Oh, it is. No, that is what's going on. Okay,
case, if there are moral truths that exist in nature universally, meaning that they were not written or prescribed by humans, then there must be an intelligent, moral being that fashioned the way the world is.
Not even remotely a conclusion that you can draw from your incoherent ideas of morality. Not only because we have examples of this not being true and not being universal, but also because we have naturalistic explanation that easily and adequately explains morals and why we have them. Yours doesn't.
There must be a God who writes these truths on our hearts.
Nope.
Now, some will undoubtedly point out that there are some individuals in our world that disagree with these precepts, and even more that blatantly ignore them. This does not disprove the existence of natural law, but merely points to the disobedience and ignorance of some in humanity.
That doesn't make sense. You can't have it both ways. It's written on your heart, but you're ignorant. No, then it's not really written on your heart. Or you can ignore it when you feel like it. So it's not like hard coded. Like you can. It doesn't make sense. What you're saying makes no sense. Also, it's wrong.
Individuals will fall short of any moral code. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. When we see a near universal acceptance of certain truths across language and culture, there can only be one answer. God made it that way. And for
No, the actual answer is evolution made it that way. Us evolving as a species together and different people evolving over time as groups. That's what made it that way. So we don't really need God to explain it. And even if we did, that wouldn't make God the explanation because that's not how things work. But whatever, just keep lying to people, I guess. I don't know what else to say. And I'm saying lying because, I mean, come on, he's got to know better, right? What was that last time I was wrong? Well, that was different because that guy, I mean, this guy's a pastor. He has to know better, right? Not necessarily. Oh, he could be stupid. So either he's stupid or he's lying. Those are the only two possibilities. He could be both. He could be stupid and lying, actually. Come to think of it. But you know what? Even if he is stupid and lying, that doesn't matter. What matters is the argument. His arguments suck, and I'm tired of him. So I'm done. Yeah, that's it. I'm done. Yeah, 2 minutes left on his video. But I've already translated that to Deconverted Man time, which means I'd be here for another 20 minutes talking about how wrong he is. And I think I've proven my point already. So we're good. We're good. An hour's more than enough, and I'm done. And if you want me to do more, then you know what to do. You already know what to do. But I'm going to say what to do anyways, even though you know what to do. Put a comment in the thing of the video, under the video. Once it's a video, post your comment there. Put a thing in your underwear. Yeah, put it down. Put it down there. Woohoo! Post a comment. Be sure to like the video. Be sure to spread it around. Let other people know about the sound that you heard from the man that had a plan. His name's Deconverted, and he's the man. If he can't do it, no one can. Probably that's not true because other people could probably still do it. But I don't know. That's just a saying. Don't take it too literally. And sort of, the chat doesn't count because YouTube doesn't care. Whatever you say in chat don't count for YouTube. So please help YouTube by posting comments in YouTube. That's what counts for YouTube. Your chat doesn't count for YouTube purposes and engagement and traction and gets it big so that people will take a swig of the logic and maybe they'll dig the stuff that I'm doing. Hig. This song is dead. It needs to die. Goodbye, guys. See ya to my lie. So what did the thing, things, words. Good night.